Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Quality Center PSO's webinar on safety platform reports. We would like these meetings to be very interactive, so we encourage you to ask questions and share information. We'll keep all lines muted to cut down on feedback, distractions, and echoing. Before we get started, I'd like to go over the logistics for today's session, followed by some brief announcements. All lines are currently muted and in listen-only mode. During Q&A, you may ask a question or make a comment by raising your hand by clicking on the hand icon and the Grab tab located on the left side of your control panel, and your line will be unmuted. Please announce your name and organization prior to speaking. Feel free to also ask questions or make comments using the question box located in your control panel throughout the session. I also want to draw your attention to the handouts for today, located in the lower right-hand portion of your control panel. There are 3 handouts. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the Quality Center PSO members-only website. So on to some brief announcements. Speaking of the members-only website, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that our website has moved. We are updating the content and the appearance, so please bear with us. In addition, the password has changed in order to access the members-only content. Please contact Lainey or you need an updated. Probably over the last couple of weeks, you have received our first mid-year PSO summary report. We've been busy sending those out to members who have renewed 2018 contracts with us. The reports were primarily sent out via encrypted email. We utilize Protected Trust for that. So you should have received a regular email saying what your shared secret code was in order to access the report in Protected Trust. The purpose of sending these feedback reports to you all was multifactorial. First, we want your organization to know what offerings we've had for the first half of the year. And we also want to get your feedback on what we're missing or what we can do to improve to make our educational offerings more accessible to you and to your team. Secondly, for those of you who share your data with us, we want to give you some feedback on that data, the quality and the frequency of it, and how it compares to the aggregate data set available in the safety platform that Mike is going to talk to you a little bit more about. Additionally, we wanted to set goals for the PSO and for our members related to things like the number of RCAs submitted and the percentage of near-miss reports. And lastly, we wanted you to know about additional features and tools that exist in the safety platform that are available to you, but you may not currently be utilizing them. That's also the intention of this webinar, which is to introduce to you some of the additional features now available. Of course, as always, I want to emphasize that we will meet you where you're at in terms of your event reporting journey and sharing your information with the PSO. Not all organizations are in the same place, and that is perfectly fine. I would say, though, if you haven't accessed your mid-year summary report, please do so. The feedback we've received so far about these reports has been very positive, and we'll use constructive feedback to help inform our future reports as well. A couple other quick announcements. I wanted to let you know about our upcoming autumn webinar series. It's right around the corner, starting in September, with Outcome Ingenuity, who will be talking about the Just Culture Foundation for safety culture in your organization. We'll have Joanne Campione talking just a couple days later about what she's learned studying hospital patient safety culture across time in various hospitals. Also from UNC, University of North Carolina, we have Carol Durham, going to talk about how we train new clinicians and the components of safety and stimulation. And lastly, we're going to close out our series there with Mike, who's going to talk a little bit more about socializing measures of harm, how you can use high reliability measures throughout your organization to advance. We have a couple of upcoming SAFE tables. One is September 18th on patient staff violence. I'm particularly excited about this one because we should be partnering with Atrium PSO out of Charlotte. I'll have more information to share with you guys about that shortly. Right now we have a lot of folks signed up from the state facility, so go DSOF, but we would really like to have mixed representation. So if you haven't signed up for that one, please do. That will be located here in Cary. And then later on in October, we're going to be in Gastonia, I believe, for that one, talking about barcode administration and workarounds. And those are all free, of course, as part of your PSO membership. And last but not least, this is our final workshop of the year. It is still in draft mode, but it will be called Build It Strong, the Nuts and Bolts of PSO Protections. It's going to be on November 13th, a day-long workshop where we really kind of go through what are the details of the PSO protections, what does that mean for your organization, what should you have in your internal policies and procedures, what are the components of the training for the folks in your organization, what should they know about the PSO, and about how you've operationalized it, made it functional within your organization, and then of course the role of leadership with all of that. We are highly encouraging all of our PSO member hospitals and organizations who do not have a fully implemented internal policy and procedure to attend this event. It will be free, it will be all day, so please mark your calendars. Nancy Shawns will be back for it. We also hope to have some other guest speakers, and it should be a really educational, worthwhile day. Even if you've been part of the PSO for a good while, please, please, please mark your calendar and plan to join us for that. So with that, I want to say that presenting for you today is Mike Personette from Next Plane Solutions. He's the vendor of our safety platform. And today we're going to be reviewing the features that are available in the dashboard, some of the insights reports, both the basic and aggregate reports, high reliability measures program, and more. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Mike.
Great, thanks, Claudia. So first of all, just sitting through these announcements, I want to compliment the Quality Center team. I don't know if those of you on the phone are aware what a great opportunity you have to be a part of the North Quality Center PSO. Next Plane works with a number of PSOs across the country, and we try to facilitate this kind of service orientation with any of them. But I have to say, you guys are really fortunate to have these guys right there in your backyard. They're really putting together some strong stuff. I was just shaking my head at the mid-year reporting work that Claudia's got out there. Really awesome stuff. So compliments to you guys and the team, Claudia. Okay, so for today, we're going to share my screen here. And that should now be visible by everyone. Claudia, if you could confirm that for me. Seeing a browser from me.
Yes, Mike, thank you.
Great. All right, guys. So we're going to just talk through, the only thing formal about this is that you all can't just jump in with a question, and that can just get kind of messy on a webinar, but want to encourage you to chime in with any questions through the chat or the question answer panel throughout the conversation today. We want to cover a couple things all around the participation, how you can participate in the PSO from a data perspective, and what you're then getting out of that to make it worth your while. All of you, I assume, have maybe seen or heard of the Nextplane platform through the Quality Center. We're going to just acclimate you a little bit here at first, in case you haven't necessarily ventured into the reporting modules just yet. Those have just recently become available to y'all, so this is kind of a orientation, but first want to just make sure you kind of know where you're at in the application as a whole. So many of you are logging in and landing on a screen that probably looks something more like this. It's our dashboard screen, and if you haven't yet submitted data, you're not seeing much here. It's not terribly interesting until you have data in here, because this is representative of your data. And that is our exchange menu. And I won't go there, but just in case you're wondering how data gets into this system specific to your hospital, and in my demo here, I'm a member of Big City Hospital. It's through an export and upload process that we support with the Quality Center. It takes an hour to sort of prepare your data for the first time. It takes another hour to go through and map your data into the system. And once that's processed, all the data you're submitting becomes available through these reports that we'll talk about today. So as you're looking at the data from the PSO, it is reclassified to the PSO terms and questions, and we do all that through the mapping. Now, it's been a very proven process. We have over 800 hospitals across the country participating in this mapping and uploading process. We receive about 75,000 events a month through these 800 hospitals, and have accumulated more than 3.5 million events since we started this 5 years ago. So it's a smooth process. I always get a kick out of, I get emails whenever someone processes a file and I see the number of records that are coming into the system. It becomes, if you haven't done it once or twice yet, it becomes pretty habitual. It's pretty repetitive, and you can knock it out in 30 minutes, maybe an hour on a monthly basis to have your data really flowing into the PSO. Now, there's a nightly lag for your reports to then be reflective of that data. And the reason we created the dashboard is to emphasize for you data quality, essentially. Now, in my demo, I've just got a few records in here. You'll have a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand. But we're showing you here on the dashboard what we're sort of looking at to know that you're participating in a strong manner. A couple traps people fall into on submitting. One, it's easy to forget. Or you get out of that monthly habit and you start falling behind, and then you're not sure if you should submit. So first, we make it really easy to remember: submit as much as you have, as often as you can. We handle, and in the training we'll talk about how we handle potential duplicate event IDs, and all of those sorts of things are things we talk with you during training, and are really simple. It's really hard to kind of make a mistake like that in the system, but people are just hesitant sometimes to really sort of own that. So you really can't break things here. Always call us if you have a question. We want to work those out, but the rule of thumb is it's better to submit, and submit often than anything else. So we're looking for that trend, the overall count of your records, and then a steady monthly trend. So where we see people dip and they kind of disappear for a couple months and then they pop back up, those are things we're looking at to just kind of monitor utilization. You might get a reminder every so often from us or the PSO team looking for some missing buckets, some missing data in a month or two. Just kind of loosely monitoring that to make sure we've got good quality volume of data. We are also looking for timely data, so we have a submission lag, and that's just the time between the date you submit the information to the event date, the date it occurred. And this is usually around 90 days or less is pretty good, since we're not yet in a monthly habit across the board. A lot of people are still doing quarterly submissions, or kind of try to do monthly but not consistently. So we're 90 or less on the submission lag, but it's a good number just to kind of check on, make sure your things are coming in timely. Reporting lag is actually your own internal measure. Hopefully yours isn't 55 days. That's just a check for you to know how timely you're getting the information from the day it's reported to you from the date it occurred. So if you're an online system and people report timely, that should be 0. If you're a paper system and it's got to kind of cycle through, that might be 5 or 10 days. That reporting lag is just a good internal metric for you to know if you've got your own sort of awareness issue in your data where it's taken a long time for you to hear about events. And then really the data quality number is the other sort of big number that we want to point out. This is a representation, in this case it's 70%, of the fields that we use in our analysis have an answer in them. So it can be a result. Many times when we're working with folks, it's the first time some have really exported these fields and really tried to use them. We always work with folks in a spreadsheet, really tried to use them internally, and they realize what they thought was their severity score applied to every event coming in. It's really only getting applied about 10% of the time. That can be one of the reasons you might have a less than 100% quality score. It can be your own internal data, and we want you to be aware of that so you can go back and sort of rethink how your maybe a required field here or a little form change there will help compliance with getting those answers in on these very common but high priority fields. The data complete chart is the same metric, just broken down by those high priority fields. So in this example, you notice my event type field, I'm only pushing 13 answers out of the 38 for the full period I have here. I've only, about half of the time have I submitted location records with an answer to the location of where it occurred. So those are my 2 gaps that I can see here. I want to go back and look at my data first and see if there's something I can address that would cause those fields to be answered more consistently. And then there's a potential second answer, which is that the mapping template in our system is not up to date. Or perhaps this field just wasn't available and it's not being submitted. So legitimate answer, but one we want you to be aware of. So you can always check that and just see kind of where you're at, and you can always verify the mapping template. Part of this process allows you to submit data that you have today, and the next month we're going to identify that perhaps you had a whole new set of departments that you added, or a whole new set of departments started reporting events and they really haven't in the past. Our mapping process would require you to update your map, and if that didn't happen, you'll have less compliance here. So it's a flag for you to just be aware of the quality of data that we're getting from you on a completeness basis.
Mike, thank you.
You can manipulate. Oh, go ahead, Claudia.
Sorry, I just want to chime in that. So the submission lag, reporting lag, data quality score, and sort of the breakdown by those discrete fields, the high priority discrete fields, that was something that was included in the feedback report for folks. So thank you for pointing out that that's always available to all of our members whenever they sign in. And like you were going to demonstrate, it can be manipulated.
Right, you can expand this to focus in on your most recent couple months to see how your current submissions, or you can go all the way out to all data. We defaulted to the last 12 months, so it's a rolling 12 months of activity that we're using here. You can customize the date range if you want to look for a very specific range, and just click to apply that filter. Last point here, if you're a system with multiple hospitals or facilities defined in the PSO, you'll see a list here versus your single facility. That's also geared to understand that are you submitting all the data for all of your facilities, or has a facility or two fallen out of how you're reporting your events to the PSO? So that's a little boring here with one facility, but systems see their full list there. Okay, lastly on this page, just a quick way to kind of scan what's the breakdown by event type in this example, by severity, type of report. Just a quick way to get a feel here. Okay, I've got some no value events. Why is that? Well, I've loaded some records that didn't have an answer to severity. No value is the same thing as these gray lines on the bar. Just a quick way to explore, but we're going to go into more bigger reports here that you can have, that I would recommend you use to start exploring your data. Okay, so that's submit, wait a day, come back and check out your results. Now, we also have a search feature that's somewhat of a form of a report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want you to be aware. And actually, our enhancement in this last month or 2 weeks ago, revamped our search features as well. The point here is you have access to every record you've ever submitted to the PSO. You have full visibility to the full detail that you've submitted to the PSO. You can come into search, click all events. It automatically pulls up everything you have. We have a little more granular searches here that you're welcome to explore. And in the newer features, you're able to come over to filter and really expand how you can filter that data down, as well as select new columns that you want to visualize your data around and just get access to the data you're submitting. Anything you click on in here will open up the full detail of that event. So should you ever see, why are all my events falling into falls? I feel like that's not really where my volume is. Why is that? You can come in and test some of your event level records. The event ID is your identifier. So if you're using a vendor product locally, it's that number that we're loading here, so you can have a common code to look up specific events and just kind of see how they're translating into the PSO. So did want to reference search just so you know it's there. And then here in our Insight menu, reports, the primary comparative report, I'll jump right to the report. And here, if you have multiple facilities in your health system, you'll see the facility list that you could break that down. If you're a facility safety team member at a facility in a system, then you'll only see your facility. And then system folks can see all or extend. You can then extend this data to look at appear. But if you narrow it, is a subgroup within the PSO of like-minded facilities. And I say it that way because Claudia and team really define what collaboratives they want to leverage here. And a couple examples of how folks have used collaboratives. One is folks going through a high reliability journey, maybe at different stages of their experience. And the very early stage is a little different than the later stages. And if you want to be comparing yourselves among folks who are going through that same process, you might create a collaborative that's a wave 1 HRO collaborative, wave 2, wave 3. Might also just create a collaborative that's more about where you are in the state, if that's important. a collaborative can be anything. It's the collection of a like-minded group. The PSO is, of course, the entire Quality Center PSO membership. And then national, through the affiliation we have with the Quality Center and them to us as NextPlane, you can also compare across the entire NextPlane data set. Now, I want to be clear on this. It's the national NextPlane data set. There is not an effective national, federally sponsored national data set just yet. Some of you may have heard of AHRQ sort of overseas PSOs. This is an AHRQ-based program, and there is an effort for a de-identified national data set to be available down the road. Today, we contribute about 90% of the data that's in that data set. So you're really not missing out on much just yet, with the size of the NextPlane data set being so large relative to that effort. So our national data is available to you to select. I'm going to stick with PSO here, and that automatically applies all members in the PSO. You can then filter that down by a bed range, type of ownership, academic affiliation, or the type of provider, which you're providing to your PSO on an annual basis, and they're tracking this for you. It's your profile within the PSO data set. That combination then applies to the comparative. So let's talk about what you're really seeing on this chart, which, by the way, is backed up, and I see it's in the handouts already. This is explained a little more robustly in our NextPlane Analytics Guide. I would encourage you guys to download that, keep it handy. You certainly won't remember all this tomorrow, and that's a nice reference for you to be able to understand how to read this chart. It's a box and whiskers display of the comparative data. So the blue box is the middle 50%. The whiskers, which are the green bars, are the 95th percentiles. And then the green dot is your facility, or whatever you've selected up here as your single facility or your health system, whatever is selected in this facility box. So the green dot is you. The box and whiskers are the comparatives. You can modify how you're looking at the data by switching this from, I always default it to event type. Maybe you want to look at it by severity. Maybe you want to expand the date range. We kind of always go for the last 2 years, but you can certainly mess with those dates by event date. I've tightened that up too much, so I need to reset that. My demo data is really tiny, so I won't do too much messing around here with those. But you're able to switch the view, so the x-axis is based on whatever you choose in the dimension. And then within that data, you can filter on this third row here to say that maybe you only want to look at high severity events by event type, or you want to look at falls and change your dimension to be severity. All of these filter the data down, of course, based on what you're submitting. So we're only able to give you back opportunities to filter your data and to visualize your data based on what we've received from you, which comes back to that data quality concern at the beginning. So it's full circle here, but what you put into the system, you can get out right here in your event comparative as really the primary report with comparative data. Along the lines of checking your data quality, keep in mind the submission trend report, very basic trend report, monthly buckets. You can expand it out to 36 months. It'll break down by your facility list, if you choose facility, for those of you who have multiple facilities. And you can trend by, it defaults to event date, but if you want to look at how you're submitting data or when it was created in our system, some special reasons you might want to do that. 99% of the time, you're going to look at it by event date. And this will fill in those buckets so you know, oh man, why did we miss March? Or back in October, what did we do where we dropped just sort of out of trend? You know, you're always going to have a little fluctuation, but if you're trending at 110 and all of a sudden it's 10, you might have had a problem with your data submission then, and it's a good quality check for you to know how you're trending out. Those of you who can't run a trend report in your local system, you're welcome to jump here and run that because this is your data back to you. There's no comparative data in this particular report. Also, your data, ability to just kind of picture it a bit differently based on the PSO categories and how your data has been mapped through, is the counts by dimension report. And it's just a simple bar chart breaking down, again, these key dimensions. This one's by severity. You can flip that to event type, filter it down by just my incidence or just my high severity. Perhaps you want to look at just a single item out of that grid. You can choose to ignore other, for example, or no value to see how the breakdown changes. So a quick way for you to visualize the data. A lot of people are coming here to see a little more on that no value from a pure quality perspective. Event date ranges as well. So you can get your hands on that characteristics of your data as it's been submitted to the PSO here through the counts by dimension. If you're curious how your organization has been profiled, you can run the facility profile report, and that will show you your facilities. So again, I'm seeing a few here because that's my data. Notice these are all, just to make everybody comfortable, these are all fake facilities. And your profile information is here. So if you're not sure, this is always a good check just to make sure the PSO has the correct information for you and current bed counts and all that. It's fairly static information, but it's a good double check to make sure you are going into the group you think you are when you pick your bed range. The event trend is another comparative report where we're comparing, it's a little bit tricky. We're comparing the black line is your data. And again, apologies for the bad demo data here, but black line is your data. The box and whiskers are the range of the peer group, but it's measuring how they change. We can't really trend, we can't really compare your trend to somebody else's counts. The reason for that is somebody else's counts are going to be different, regardless of their bed size and all of that. You just have a different culture. So that can be very different. So what we did was we put the same line on the percent change for the peer group. So in other words, if your numbers are bouncing around more than their numbers are bouncing around, you'll see a chart kind of like this, where it's just kind of ugly. But if you're, have decent trends, then the comparative group kind of comes back to you. And you can see if your percent change is sort of shaping up the same way that the comparative group is. In other words, are you getting consistent reporting compared to how others are getting consistent reporting from your event system, detecting near misses, detecting or getting reported actual incidents? Okay. So that's the tour of the application. We're going to go through a few slides now to touch on a few other areas, and it's just simpler for me to refer back through some slides. But if anybody has questions regarding how to get your hands on these reports, any of that, you can always email our team at support@nextplanesolutions.com, or of course you can get in touch with the Quality Center PSO via email with them as well. And we coordinate together all the time on what kind of answers we need to get back to you guys. But if you're having any trouble logging in, any trouble finding insight, certainly any trouble uploading your data, always just ping us. We're happy to talk with you, walking you through a specific report, how to interpret it, all of that stuff. We're excited to talk with you about that.
Mike, while you're pulling up your other slides, I just want to remind everyone that the insights, so the reports, that's available, the little graphic icon on the left-hand side toolbar of NextPlane should now be available for everyone in the Quality Center PSO. So when you log in, I would ask you to to check and see that icon is lit up and it's blue, and that you can get into and access that feature now. And I think you're going to talk about the measures now.
Yeah. As soon as I can figure out how to move my slide. There we go. Okay, so we've talked a lot about event submissions, getting your event data in, the reports coming back to you. Of course, that information the PSO team is always digging into and looking for data anomalies to support their safe table activity, and there's all of that activity going on as well. We're just sort of going across the top level service here of submit your data, get some reports back, some immediate feedback to you. Not covering all the stuff that the PSO team dives into with that data on the event side. But we also have this second opportunity for you guys to participate and collaborate among the members. This is our high reliability collaborative, and what we've done, the way we've approached this, is we've defined 4 measures that are traditional numerator denominator kind of measures. So it has nothing to do with your event detailed data. And our aim is to help people improve the agility and capacity of their learning system. We don't look at patient safety as just your event reporting system and how many of those are you getting reported. These are covering more of the aspect of patient safety being a learning system. How can we improve that agility and capacity by 25% over the next 24 months as measured in these specific measures? So if you opt into the program, you adopt 4 measures, which the first 2 are pretty simple. You're going to be able to get these. The second 2 might challenge you a little bit on being able to capture this. The payoff, first and foremost, is if you agree with our methodology here, we believe these 4 measures create a nice sort of 40,000-foot view of your local safety program. So even if you're not able to submit these, we would strongly encourage you to think about how to adopt some level of measure like this. We'd of course advocate for these into your local to stay on top of the quality of the learning process that you're going through as part of your patient safety system. So reported significant events per adjusted patient day gives us a feel for the level of detection you have out there adjusted for your volume. But reported significant events per near miss or no harm events gives us another way to get a feel for detecting near miss, no harm as much as you're detecting reported significant events. And those need to be closely related. We're actually learning a lot on this right now, where people who just go back and measure the last 6 months are sharing that really they're reporting 2 actual events that caused harm to every 1 near miss, which is not what we want to see. Organizations we're working more closely with, really on the ground working with them, and I actually just looked at this yesterday and it blew me away, are at a ratio of 20 to 1, 20 near miss reports to 1 harm event. And I didn't think that was possible. So we're actually shocked that they were able to get it that high, have gone through validations of that, and starting to figure out how they're able to manage that, because that was great. We thought it might be as high as 10, but it's possible to go a lot higher on the near miss side if you're adapting your workflow and how people are handling that and getting good analysis of those detectable risks before the harm. So get off my soapbox here and just say these detection rates we think would be very valuable for you guys to adopt.
So Michael, stay on your soapbox for a minute. So
Okay.
our goal in the feedback report, or our goal and sort of challenge to our PSO members at large, is to say we would like to see 2 near miss reports for every 1 incident that comes in. So that is nothing compared to a 20-to-1 ratio. But still, moving in that direction. I don't know that any of our members right now are at that level. The highest that I saw was some of our hospitals are around 20% near miss reporting. So we have a ways to go. And what we would really, really love to have all of our member organizations do is track at least 2 of these high reliability measures at a minimum. So the near miss no harm events per reported significant event and the reported significant events per adjusted patient days. So those 2, I think, would be a really fabulous start, regardless of where folks are on their high reliability journey. All 4 would be great, but we'll settle for the 2 easiest ones. I'll turn it back over to you.
I just have one thing to add. I know, Mike, at some point you're going to talk more about analysis and learning and improvement, but when you get there, if you don't mind just sharing how those hospitals that you're seeing that are having a large number of near misses and no harm events reporting, how they're using that in the learning so that they can reduce the number of those significant events that are occurring.
Great. Yeah, perfect. And I would really encourage you guys, and Claudia is right on the point here with the 2-to-1 goal, because what we found, we want to write this up as a case study, of course, but I know from working with these folks very closely, it was much, and in others that have just done the measures with us, it's much more about starting an awareness program that you're tracking this ratio, and you want to start seeing that improve. You'd be amazed at how quickly that will change when you emphasize it and when you support with the right kind of support up front at your staff level, how quickly that can turn on you. So don't be afraid to try there. I think you'll be shocked at how the results come in if you're thoughtful about how to really promote and welcome that sort of reporting. That's certainly generally the pathway that we're seeing that's just the most effective. It's just knowing that it's being measured and being aware of that ratio should be higher. You get a lot more early detection. The other 2 measures, I won't get into a lot of detail. We have a full document to support this, that if you're curious, contact the PSO team and we'll share the full definitions of these and get you going. But just to point out, we're looking then beyond detection to put in systems that track how much analysis are you doing. An analysis in our view is something of significance like an RCA, not necessarily a full-blown RCA, but what is the rate of events that you're analyzing through a credible method per the reported significant event count. So to implement this, you have to kind of be able to track your RCAs. Perhaps you've implemented a learning from defects model, an ACA model. Credible method of review is what we're looking for per RSE, to know that you're getting some learning out of it, getting some analysis completed out of this, which leads to learning, which is our 4th measure where we've implemented a way to track. This is right out of the MPSF RCA squared approach, to track the strength of actions assigned and committed to in response to your analysis. So what we're looking for there is a quantifiable way to call out how much you're doing that's sort of the easier education reminder type stuff versus the more forcing function permanent fix type stuff. We're quantifying that through this strong action per credible analysis method. So if you're doing those, it requires you to have a column in your action planning where you can adopt a 1 to 7 scale and evaluate each action item from that perspective to get an average here going to report into the process. So we would really encourage you to consider it. It's optional, and we hope you'll find that it's sort of a nice, it'll sort of fill in some blanks where you can really look at your program at a higher level, even again, if locally. We obviously want to get that comparative data as a PSO, but we believe this will really help make a difference for you to sort of know if you've got a strong learning system in place as you're going through improving culture and driving high reliability.
Mike, thank you for that. I do want to point out that the guide on with the additional definitions is in the handout section of the webinar. And in addition to that, I included what I put together was sort of a sample measures collection tool in Excel. Oh, and it looks like you're going, are you going to demonstrate how they would put this information in? Because that would be fabulous.
Well, I was going to, and unfortunately it looks like my demo's not really ready for that. So let me give you some screen flows here.
So while you're pulling that out, like I was saying, in the handouts, there is an Excel sheet that I put together that can be modified to help guide. It's got the definitions and how you would collect each month your numerator and denominator to then enter into Nextplane. And I'll let you walk through your slides here, Mike.
Great. Yeah, and these slides are a guide that you'll get when you sign up for the measure module. So the step-by-step is just part of our documentation. But you're clicking the measures module from the dashboard, and we generate a screen that I tried to pop over to show you. I'm not quite ready for it, but this is a screenshot right out of the system where we're displaying the months that are, we call it an open window. You enter your data every month, and we allow you like 120 days to get that information in. So there's always a few months kind of in arrears that you can always come back and enter. But you're entering a numerator. Notice we have a three-step process, 1, 2, 3. Enter your numerators. That's the measure, and then the date, and then the facility. In this case, I have 3 facilities I'm entering for. Credible event analysis, near miss, no harm, reported significant events. That's the numerator for each of the measures you're entering. Then we go to the denominator step, and we're entering denominators. So there we need the action plans approved, the adjusted patient days, and the reported significant events here. You do a final review just to see those side by side, numerator, denominator, by date and facility, and then click finish, and your data is now available to the PSO, available in the measures reports. So right after you enter your measures, you can come down and you can click on Insight. Sorry, not right after, nightly. Click on Insight, click on the measures report, and we provide a trend with a number of variables to choose your measure, choose the as of date. We do both the rolling average and the actual rates, the monthly rates. So you choose the rate type, and again, the collaborative here as well to choose who you want to be compared against. And this chart is also available and described in the Nextplane Analytics Guide. But here as well, we're trending along. The green line is your rate. The blue bar is your measure, your actual value. In this case, I'm looking at reported significant events per patient day, so it's per 10,000 days. I have number of events over on the y-axis. On the second y-axis, that's the blue bar. So you see the count along with the rate, and then the purple is the PSO level, and the sort of gray is your collaborative. So a way to quickly get some value back on this, a good trend line for each measure as you've entered it compared to your collaborative or your PSO aggregate to share internally on where you guys are headed as a program using these measures as your guide. And again, that's all available just by entering the data and waiting an evening. It's in the system for your own internal use, if nothing else. So we just strongly encourage you to think about that as a way to sort of get out of the rat race of chasing events everywhere. That's obviously important to make sure those events are investigated properly and documented, but think a little differently about what value are you getting out of that? Where should you be spending your time? And if you have a strong measurement program, a strong safety program as a whole, you can rely on your process to know you're detecting like you should, you're analyzing like you should, you're learning like you should. And as a safety leader in your organization, you're managing that overall program and being smarter about where you're going after your deeper dives become a lot smarter and a lot more valuable than our typical, what we're typically running into in safety programs. Okay, last topic for us here. And again, where did I do with this? We have taken on an initiative. In fact, our last release was our first release on this initiative. And it's an artificial intelligence initiative. To check out an article from Google, we're partnered with Google's artificial intelligence tools and are leveraging those, which include some pretty fancy stuff, is the gist of this. But natural language processing, sentiment analysis, some really exciting stuff from, for the data geeks on the call. Where we're at today is kind of in the data geek phase. But you actually have access through the search tool to the sentiment scores that are coming back to us on every single event you submit to your PSO. And what we're finding in some early analysis is that a sentiment score, it basically measures the emotion of how you're communicating your event from the reporter's description, the brief description from your event system. How negative or positively they're communicating the story, the patient's story. And that is it's very telling when you think about your safety data from more of terms of culture. So quickly, natural language processing and sentiment analysis. Everybody's hearing a lot about artificial intelligence as the new cool thing, but this technology has actually been in use for well over 30 years. So it's not exactly as new as you might think here listening to a lot of the coverage around data science these days. In other words, it's well-founded and we can really get some good value out of it. It's not as cutting edge as people would like you to believe. And when we did a sample of events, we used the sentiment analysis and looked at the urgency that's conveyed in the patient safety story compared to sort of the emphasis behind it. So did somebody in a very concise manner share a very passionate plea for help, or did they spend more time being thoughtful about how they're describing the case? And lo and behold, we found, although we have a very low amount of these events, professional conduct is where people get the most emotional around what they're conveying. And that goes straight to your culture. And I know that's no surprise to you guys. Those are usually the ones that get a little lengthy and have some very strong language in them. But the reason I point that out first is it's sort of validation, just that single data point of what this is actually measuring and tracking. Now, we looked at provision of care cases and found they're actually on the edge of being an outlier compared to the broader data. And those are very common. The big circle means they're very common. Medication, also very emotional conveyance of the concern, and a lot of them. Diagnostic specimen handling, a lot of them, and a little stronger. They're inside the norms here, but a little stronger emotional than the average. So early results, we're also using the natural language processing tools to reclassify events, as in this example. So while we know that medications are still number one and other is just always going to haunt us, we went through all the detail and reclassified these events based on broader descriptions and found provision of care to be number 3, probably not a big shocker for local systems, fall to be up there, but diagnostic lab specimen jumping up at 5%, 17,000 of the cases we looked at, a much higher ranking than where that typically falls. So a different way to sort of, we can reclassify the data by event type based on the text that we're receiving in the description field. We did the same thing with contributing factors. And the learning here, quite honestly, was the current contributing factors, the current way we describe safety events still attributes cause to the patient. And then secondly, to the team, which from a just culture, well, from a high reliability perspective means we're still pointing fingers and not looking hard enough at the process. It's not to say the patient doesn't have a huge impact on their own or on an event that occurs. They always have involvement. Staff obviously have a lot of involvement. But when we're thinking about how to classify these things, we need to be providing more information in our descriptions and in our classifications about what else is responsible or has attributed to the cause. So that, more than anything, just sort of validated that concern that in the data we're still doing a lot of finger pointing, but it taught us something. Now we know we need to come out and get more aggressive in teaching how to classify contributing factor and causal factors. So we're just scratching the surface on this. As I mentioned, you have access, and we can talk about how you can get to the sentiment scoring that we're doing. We're just now getting to a place where the data is, our latest release does all that reclassification work, does all that sentiment analysis on our history, and then on every record you submit going forward, it's automatic and immediate. We're starting to now digest we're building some more reports to then push those out to you in more of that template fashion. But the raw data is available at an event level now, and just really exciting stuff for us. We're really excited to be working in this sort of space versus just the same old stuff that safety has seen for years. So wanted to give you that as kind of a just view of the future here from us. We're always working to be more innovative and welcome your feedback all along the way throughout this whole experience. And turn it back to Claudia.
Wow, Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. It's actually the first time I've heard you do sort of an overview of the artificial intelligence work. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind actually going back and giving us the name of that article from The Economist that you mentioned. The Economist.
Yeah, the top one, January 5th, 2017.
Perfect. Finding a voice? Finding a voice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so to the folks that have hung in there with us, are there any questions? Anybody want to raise hands or type in their questions? Doesn't look like we have anything coming in. So just a reminder that this webinar has been recorded. And I would say that this concludes our session. We thank you so much for joining us and ask you to please answer our brief survey questions that will appear when you exit the webinar. And you may now disconnect. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.